In number 6, we've got this function here, f of x is equal to a plus b cosine. And we know that a is the midline and b is the amplitude. And instead of giving us that information, they give us these 2 points. X is equal to 1/3 pi and y is equal to 5, and x is equal to pi and y is equal to 11. So if I treat this like a function and I put in the 5 where y goes and I put in the pi over 3 where the x goes, well, I can find out what cos or cosine of pi over 3 is. I just got to plug that in to make sure I'm in radians here. So let's see, cosine of pi over 3, that equals 1/2. So now that's the same thing as 1/2 times b. And see, I've got another piece of information. I'm going to put it over here. 11 is equal to a plus b cosine 1 pi. So if I put a pi in there, cosine pi is equal to -1, giving me a new equation of y, or 11 equals a minus b. If you've got cosine and you've got an angle, you can turn it into a number. So now I'm going to get a alone in both of these cases, and then find out what the other is equal to, because the a's have to be the same. So that means these other parts have to equal each other. And I'm going to get solved for b, and I find out that b is equal to -4. When I plug -4 in for b back to the original equation, I get 11 is equal to a minus a -4, which is the same thing as a plus 4, which means that a is equal to 7. So a is equal to 7 and b is equal to -4. Let's move on to part 2. Part 2, they want a set of values. That means there's typically more than one, where if a function equals k, there isn't a solution. So keep in mind, graphically, when we're finding a solution, we're taking this 7 minus 4 cosine of x, and we're graphing it, and then we graph whatever the number is that the solution is, in this case k, and then they intersect someplace, and then we tell them where the angles are where they intersect. Well, what we want now is where or what are the numbers that could never intersect with this graph. So I'm going to go ahead and do this. I've got the midline is 7, and the amplitude is 4. So I go 4 above the midline, and I go 4 below the midline. That gives me 3. And so what's happening is that I'm just outlined where this 7 minus 4 cosine graph must live. It's got to live between these green lines. It must live between 3 and 11. And that means that if there are any values for k that are outside that range, that we wouldn't be able to solve them because they'll never intersect. And I'll show you just to kind of validate this. If I plug in this function and then put in 0, I get 3. And then if I put in pi over 2, I'm going to get 7. And then if I put in pi, I'm going to get an 11. And if I put in 3 pi over 2, I'm going to get 7. And I put in 2 pi, it's going to get 3. And you can see this cycle is going to repeat inside these green lines over and over again. If k is any number outside above 11 or below 3, then there's not going to be a solution because it'll never intersect with that graph. So the way I tell them is k, if it's greater than 11 or k is less than 3, there'll be no solution. And that's the answer to the last part. Okay, so I hope that helped, and thanks for watching.